So essentially, by having the expertise in your field and the access to all these resources that are readily available with all the pool of talent that is out there, that can take the load off all these tasks, you can essentially build an intelligent content marketing strategy very inexpensively. Even if you're a single service provider without having a huge team, you essentially said that you started alone by yourself. So for how long did you do that? For how long did you go on your own until you had somebody to support you with your
content development?
Yeah.
Well, the websites, just to be clear about this, the websites were built by my business partner Martin, and Martin and I have worked together for a very, very long time. So I didn't have to worry about the website platform. Martin was going to handle that, but that's WordPress, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have to get too hung up on that. Anyone who doesn't have a Martin that finds themselves in my situation, all you need to do is look for somebody via the web that you can have a relationship with, that you trust, that's going to be able to support you with whatever your WordPress needs are. And WordPress is dirt cheap, right? So certainly those resources are out there. You just go find those. So that deals with the website piece. But in terms of content, yeah, you absolutely can do it by yourself. You know this material. As a professional, undoubtedly you're day in, day out writing materials, content for presentations, workshops. If you give advice and you have to write this advice up professionally, you have got a whole array of knowledge that you could document and position in such a way so that people can access it. And it's a very short step away from doing it all yourself into $5 gigs here, $10 gigs there, and achieve something remarkable in your content proposition. And you get better at it over time as well.
Okay, that's great, but what was the light bulb moment for you? What was
the light bulb moment for me was seeing what technology wants. Kevin Kelly talks about the technium. And the technium is the summation of all the technical or the technological progress that humankind has made. So the question behind that is, well, where do you start measuring the progress of humanity from a technology perspective? So then that means you have to start thinking about sort of going back in history and going back in time. So Kevin Kelly pointed me in the direction that the first major technology that humanity evolved was language. Because when humans could finally communicate to each other, they stopped being intellectual silos. And when you stop being an intellectual silo, you can then share ideas. And the moment you start sharing ideas, you've got the culmination of two sets of thinking, and it's a case of, 2 + 2 = 7, not 4. So humanity really kicked on. So then you think about the logical progression of the human condition since then. Plenty of other milestones. One could argue fire was a milestone, but I think the next really big one was writing. Because with writing, you have the opportunity now to record what's gone before. Prior to that, with speech, it was just oral traditions, and oral traditions only last 2 or 3 generations, and then, they die out because the accuracy is gone, and the new generations are unable to properly interpret the lessons that are embodied in those human experiences. So being able to write stuff down meant that we could finally record human history. And of course, if you look at how society was ordered, essentially those people who had the ability to master the technology of writing, and the implication of that, of course, is reading too, then those people who controlled the messaging basically had all the political power. And that prevailed and in many ways held back the human condition until such a time as, one might say, the printing press was invented. And then with the printing press, all of a sudden, language and reading and knowledge and information has now become democratized. It's accessible to everybody who can read. And so thinking that through, well, okay, what happened after that that was a real winner? Well, there was, computing, big frame computing, and then mini computing, and then standalone computing, personal computing, local area networks. And I saw all this evolve in front of me. When I was at law school, I had a standalone Amstrad PC, and I typed up my essays on it. And then when I started my first legal consulting business, I had a standalone PC, but I was sharing somebody else's offices. And eventually I got onto the local area network, which gave me access to printers. And then this thing called the internet came along. And then when that happened, in a sense, everything changed completely. So the evolution of humankind started ultimately way back with the Big Bang. And the key moment for me was this appreciation that it did start with the Big Bang, and that the technium, Kevin Kelly's technium, resulted from the evolutionary imperative that humans have been, going through. And so now we've built this thing called the internet, which is basically a collection of all the nodes, the computing nodes on this world, well, the planet, humanity's history is, So this huge computing machine contains the summation of all human knowledge and endeavour. And so it's all there for you, right? It's the world's biggest platform. So Kevin Kelly set me onto that, and that made me realise that as we begin to fuse the biological with the digital, and that the starting place for any human to begin his journey is the internet today. I came to understand that if you know your niche and you put your material into the fabric of the internet and you make it accessible to everybody, you remove all the obstacles to people having access to that, then if you do that before anybody else, and you do it better than everybody else, and you do it over a long enough period, and you do it in such a way that reflects your knowledge of that content proposition, that material. So you can define the taxonomy, and when you define the taxonomy, you explain the taxonomy, and then everything that you produce sits on top of and adds value to and augments that taxonomy. In time, those endeavours leads to you putting this huge sink on the internet where neural pathways as a concept apply, where ultimately everybody who's got an interest in that material, and we've been couched as the Wikipedia of Hong Kong immigration, right? So think about that concept. So you put together the functional equivalency of the Wikipedia of your niche, sink it into the fabric of the internet, and then everyone who's got any kind of interest in that will ultimately end up passing across your site. And that's the game. And over time, that becomes more pronounced and more profound. And of course, over time, your competition look around and go, well, it's too late for us to do anything about that now. And that's where you win.